Hello, I'm Chloe Richardson and welcome to Made to Measure, our new live series that delivers a quick hit of digestible event insight directly into your ears once a month. So today I am joined by fellow hosts and event industry amigo, Alex Temple, and we're going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes talking all about surveys. Now, it might sound boring, but do not be fooled. I promise you it's not. If anything, it's probably one of the most exciting things about working in events, really getting to know our attendees. And of course, as our attendees, we would love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat box below if it's a comment, or in the Q&A box below if it's a question, and we'll make sure we get to as many of them as possible. Outside of this quick fire episode today, we also welcome any other topic suggestions or feedback as per the theme of this episode. So do feel free to reach out whenever inspiration strikes. But before we dive into busting some myths about surveys, and of course, ahead of sharing some tips and tricks for how to get the best response rates for your event customer feedback, let's start from the very beginning. A very good place to start. Alex, I request, please, can you set the 15-minute timer for us? So that we're ready to go. Thank you very much. And whilst Alex is doing that, I think it's time to set the scene a bit. So I'm curious to hear from you, Alex. When we say surveys, what do we mean? What's your definition?
My definition of a survey, I'd probably say it is a way to capture feedback. That's pretty much all it is. It's a way to understand what somebody is feeling.
Great stuff. I looked this up, and the Cambridge Dictionary definition of a survey is an examination of opinions and behavior made by asking people questions. And the one example that they gave is a recent survey found that 58% of people did not know where their heart is. I'm not sure if that's an accurate bit of data, but that's according to the Cambridge Dictionary. So there we go. Now, generally, just to inform our audience a little bit, if you don't know that much about surveys, typically they consist of two different types. So you've got your questionnaires, which are really a list of questions that respondents can answer individually, or there's the interviews. So interviews involve asking a respondent a series of questions and following up with additional questions based on their answers. Generally, kind of the questionnaire model is more quantitative and interview model more qualitative. But if your survey involves a questionnaire with scalable answers, it's a quantitative survey. So different ways. There we go. Semantics out the way. Let's get into it. Alex, I'm putting you on the spot here. Now, for everybody watching, I did warn Alex I was going to ask him a question, but he doesn't know what the question is. So, Alex, your question is this. When do you think the earliest ever recorded customer feedback survey was?
Are we talking in the world, like just ever?
Globally, this is the first ever recorded customer feedback survey, according to my research.
According to your research. Okay, I'm going to go wild guess. Ancient Greece. I'm going to go, I don't know what time period that would be. I don't know, like 12 BC or something. I don't know. Something a long time ago.
Fine. Wondering if anyone in the audience has a guess when they think the earliest recorded customer feedback survey was. And no cheating, please. I know some of you in the audience might like to dabble on Google from time to time. So I'm going to quickly jump in with the answer. According to a claim by Purple, the earliest record of customer feedback comes 2 centuries ago. So not quite in ancient Greece, Alex, but apparently a merchant tradesman received a clay tablet in the 1750s, which displayed their customers' dissatisfaction with service and quality of goods. So there you go. Right, background out the way. We've done a little bit of setting the scene. Alex, give us the first event survey myth, please.
All right. The first myth is that people don't complete surveys. Now, we hear this all the time, and it's generally just a common misconception. The biggest kind of evidence for this being false is that it is one of, if not the best research methodologies in the world. It is not just used for events, and we're speaking specifically about events today, but market researchers have been using surveys all the time in multiple different forms, whether that is online e-surveys or whether they're doing additional market research. it's being used. And if there was a better way to kind of capture the understanding and feeling of people, then we would use it, but there isn't. And, you know, response rates can range from, you know, in the single digits all the way up to 90+%. But the fact of the matter is that people do complete surveys.
Totally fair. I mean, I'm not the right person to be talking about myth one in particular, because I bloody love a survey. I love being asked questions. I'm that person who someone will walk past in the street and I'll be the first to jump and say, yes, please, ask my opinion.
I think you just want to be heard, Chloe. I think you just want your voice to be out there.
I think that is probably a big part of it. If we were to ask my therapist, I'm sure they'd say something similar. But yeah, absolutely. And so I've always found this myth slightly odd, but then I guess we do have the data to suggest that people do complete surveys, and it's really the only way to really understand the thoughts, feelings and behaviors of your event attendees. So myth busted. There we go. Shall we move on to myth numero 2, please, Mr. Temple?
Myth number 2 is that only the lovers and haters complete surveys. So this is, I think, a really interesting one, because the common misconception is that only the most affected, whether you really dislike something or whether you really love something, you know, complete surveys. We see it in kind of polling environments, especially things like TripAdvisor, you know, where you either see like a 5-star review or a 1-star review. But when it actually comes to surveys and the general research methodology, this just isn't really the case. So we got asked this all the time, and I'm sure you get it, you know, brought up all the time for you, Chloe. And we decided, right, let's actually prove this. Let's properly bust this. So what we did is we took a sample of our own kind of survey responses, and we looked at about 146,000 responses from attendees who completed post-event online surveys. And we looked at one specific question, and that was Net Promoter Score, or NPS. So for those of you who don't know what NPS is or have heard of it but not really sure, essentially it's a measure of advocacy. We ask people how likely they are to recommend, in this case, an event to a friend or colleague in the industry. And it's on an 11-point scale from 0 to 10. People are then categorized into 3 different buckets. Those who score 0 to 6 are detractors, those who score 7 and 8 are passives, and those who score 9 and 10s are promoters. Now, what was interesting is that if this myth were true, we would see a high percentage of promoters and a high percentage of detractors across the data set. That actually wasn't the case. We found that only 11% of respondents were in the detractor camp, so at the far end of negative. And we saw that I think it was about 42% were in the positives, in the promoters, but the highest percentage with 47% were the passives in the middle. So it turns out that surveys are not just for the lovers and the haters. It's actually your average Joe. The average person is bang slap in the middle. That's the greatest proportion of your audience when looking at surveys.
Okay, I like that one. I think it's interesting because I do get asked this question quite a lot, particularly in the corporate world. And it is a case of, aren't people just going to fill out a survey if they're really irritated or if they've had a terrible time? But I mean, that piece of data in itself totally, again, busts that myth and really demonstrates that surveys are for everybody, so not just for me. Yay.
Yes, indeed.
Great. So officially busted that myth. Let's move on to myth number 3, please, Alex. What is it?
All right. Myth number 3 is that in-person feedback or gathering feedback in person is better than doing that with a survey, specifically an online survey. Now, this is quite a tricky one because it stems, or at least in my opinion, belief in this myth stems from a belief in the previous 2 myths, right? Belief that people don't complete surveys, and if they do complete them, well, they're only going to say really bad things or really good things, and that's not really going to help us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and ask them in person and do it that way. Now, everybody who runs an event, whether you're an organizer or event planner, you know your audience better. And sometimes asking feedback in person is the right way to go. Online surveys are not always the best option. However, there are some considerations that you have to look at before doing in-person feedback. The first thing is interview bias, or what we call interview bias. And that is where people change their answers because somebody is asking them a question. Okay, so Chloe, let's take an event. All right, if I'm coming up to you, you're in the day 1 of an event, and I'm like, hi, Chloe, I'm Alex, I'm from X company, right? Okay. Can you tell me how are you feeling? How's the event going so far, right? And I've got a big smile on my face. I'm happy, I'm bubbly, you know, I'm doing my job. Okay. Even if you had a terrible time, what would you say? Would you temper your answer at all?
I'm probably not the best person to ask this question to, Alex, because I find it quite difficult to veer away from my honest feelings. But I suppose if I put myself in that position and somebody comes up to me, I'd probably give my negative feedback in a nicer way. So I don't think I'd be as cutthroat and say, oh, that was ghastly, I hated every minute of it. But I might say, oh, there's certainly room for improvement. So whilst I wouldn't probably give them a glowing review, yeah, I think you're right. I certainly wouldn't ruin their lives with my words.
Yeah.
So yes, fine.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of that in itself is quite, not necessarily worrying, but it's quite an interesting thing because, anybody who knows you, the industry knows you very well. You're one of the most outspoken people in the industry. You like your voice being heard. And if even somebody like you is going to temper their answer, then it compromises the data and the results that you're going to get. So you really have to kind of think about how you're asking people on site. Now, the other thing to take into consideration is timing, especially in person. So if we just look at like a 3-day event, it doesn't have to be a trade show, could be a large corporate event, whatever it might be. If you are asking people their feedback at the end of day one, okay, they might have had a great networking session, they haven't seen their mates in ages, they're happy, they might have had a few beers at the bar, or might be having a sugar rush from all the virgin mojitos or something like that, whatever is their fancy. They're happy, they're pumped, they're excited. If you're like, hey Chloe, how's your event? You're like, oh, it's amazing, I haven't seen these people in ages. The first meetings of the day are done, you're excited, okay, but you've still got 2 days to go. That is a certain point in time. So that can skew your results. Equally, if you're asking people at the end of, I don't know, day 3, right, where people may have left a little bit early, people have got to catch flights, you may have missed a few meetings, you might be a little bit tired from, the run that you had to do on day 2 or something like that. And you're just a little bit flat and you're like, yeah, well, it's okay. That again is a point in time. It's not representative of the entire experience. So probably one of the most crucial things when trying to get feedback in person is let your audience experience the entire event first before you ask them. And that is why asking people after the event, in this case, we're busting the myth that in-person feedback is better than online surveys. Well, in order to gather an accurate representation of someone's experience, you have to do it after the event when they've had time to digest everything. They can look at all the meetings they had, they can look at their experience holistically rather than in isolation. And that's one thing that you really have to kind of take into consideration. Now, there is a way to do this in terms of collecting feedback in person that you can do effectively, and it's not actually on site. Something called depth interviews. And this is where you'll select a handful of kind of key stakeholders who attended the event and you interview them. It's after the event, so they've had their time to evaluate their entire experience, think about, okay, was it good, was it bad, what was going on? You don't necessarily you still have the risk of interview bias, so you must make sure that your methodology and how you're going to approach those questions and ask that respondent those questions have to be really objective with it. So it requires a little bit more thought than just handing out an iPad to a student to go walk around and complete the survey on day 1, 2 and 3. So there are ways to do feedback in person, but it can be a challenge if you're not doing it correctly. So I suppose that myth is kind of busted.
Okay, that counts. And I guess actually the myth is busted that in-person feedback is always better than online surveys. And I guess sometimes online surveys are better, sometimes a mix is better, and sometimes you can get that kind of edge on your feedback if you do it in person. So it all depends on the type of show. And I guess the objective, what you're trying to achieve from gathering this data and understanding your attendees a little bit more.
Exactly.
But, Alex, we've only got 2.5 minutes left. So,
okay.
Oh my goodness, the time just flies when you're having so much fun. So what I wanted to do is move away from the myths and move into some best practice tips and tricks for our audience so that they can take away some really valuable points that can help them get the best from their survey response rates as possible. Because we often hear this, don't we? They say, oh, we're just so worried no one's going to complete the survey. Well, we do have some best practice of things that they can implement. So do you want to go with number 1 on the best practice tips and tricks?
There we go. So tip number 1 that we have for you is market your surveys. The best thing that you can do is to shout about the fact that you want feedback from your audience. put it in your pre-event communications, put it in your in-event communications, and then follow it up with your post-event communications. Let the people who are coming to your event know that their feedback is important. And once they know that, you then start to act on it and you build trust in the feedback process. So market your surveys.
Yeah, and I guess that also avoids getting too many of the extremes, because people know they're going to be asked questions, so they feel more comfortable about it. So tip number 2 is all about timing. So send out your surveys soon after the event. Now, at Xplory, we've been working with clients for 12 years, and we found the most useful responses are delivered post-event when attendees have had time to reflect upon how the event was for them. However, you still need to strike whilst the iron is hot. So we suggest that you send out your post-event survey within a week of the end of your event at the very latest. So this buffer obviously allows you to add in any last-minute questions that have arisen over the event, but it doesn't leave it too long, because our data shows the further away from your event you try to collect feedback, the more you're going to cannibalize your response rate. So send it out soon after, but not too soon.
Exactly. And tip number 3 is incentivize your attendees. Now, this could be, incentivization is, has a range of different options. You can either offer, a $10, a Amazon gift card, or you can put your content behind, a wall so that people can complete the survey in order to get access to it. It really is up to you. There are many different ways to incentivize your attendees, and it depends on your audience about what you think was going to work best for them. But that's tip number 3.
Tip number 4, create clear subject lines and a call to action. So it might sound so obvious, but as most surveys are delivered via email, as Alex mentioned, it's important to follow email best practice to maximize your event survey response rate. So use email titles creatively, but be clear in the same way you would with anything you're trying to get across to your attendees. So aside from using our obviously a template guideline or something to allow you to create the best titles, make sure it's a subject line that's clear and obvious. Make sure you create clear and concise copy, which explains the benefits in taking part of the surveys and the incentives that Alex mentioned, and include one clear call to action. You do not want to pepper your email with various different things. Go here, do that, fill that in. You want to be super clear. We're sending you this arrow, 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 because we want you to fill this out. That should be your CTA, and hopefully that will help you increase your rates. And the last tip from today, Alex,
is send out reminders. So we know that some people need that extra nudge to complete the survey if they're not Chloe and they're not like waiting for it, 24 hours after the event. Reminders really help people to complete the survey and boost your response rate. You can set these automatically in a lot of platforms that you're using, but make sure you get those reminders out over, the 2-week period that you have your survey in field. So there we go. Those are the top tips.
Great stuff. Now our session is drawing to a close. So again, don't forget, any comments, please put them in chat. Any questions, pop them in the Q&A box. But thank you so much for joining us on episode 1 of Made to Measure, talking about survey myth busting. Hopefully we busted a few of those survey myths that you've had rolling around in your brains. And we hope you found it useful and you're taking away some of the things we've talked about to go make your surveys as effective as possible. Now, if you do have any questions spring to mind after this episode, please don't be afraid to get in touch. Our contact details are going to be on the screen in approximately 3 seconds. 2, 1, there we go. So you can either email us or reach out on LinkedIn, Alex Temple, Chloe Richardson. I'm sure you can find us. Our next Made to Measure episode will be in December, so next month, and keep your eyes peeled for a festive special. But for now, that's it from us. Bye from me.
And bye from me.
And remember, events were made to measure. Have a lovely day.